Consider This, with host Carol Schrader, is supported in part by Better Business Equipment and by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hi, and welcome once again to UNO. There's been a lot of talk about President Bush's new proposals. Certainly the tax cut is getting a lot of attention with the economic uncertainty. And there is vouchers for schools that aren't performing well for parents to use for their students. But there's one that got a little bit of attention this past week, and that's the president's plan to sort of allow faith-based organizations, nonprofits, to get a little more federal money, in fact a lot more federal money, to help solve some of our social service needs in communities. It would also allow other organizations as well some breadth in this effort. And my guests today certainly know a little bit about the subject. I'll introduce them to you. Linda Berkeley is with the Omaha Salvation Army. She's Divisional Social Services Director. Pete Tulipana is with Family Service here in Omaha. He's the Executive Director. And Jean Sassatelli is with Catholic Charities. She's the Senior Director of Behavioral Health Services. And I believe Catholic Charities is among the largest of this kind of providers in the country. Welcome to all of you. I think people know these names of these organizations, but unless they're really involved, they may not know all they do. So I'm going to start down the row and let you kind of list and show the breadth of your organizations, more than just, you know, what the obvious are. Linda, what are some of the things, real quickly, that in this area of social services that
basically we have services for every life stage, starting with prenatal care through geriatric services. We do substance abuse work. We work with people that have mental illness. We have programs for people that are homeless and formerly homeless. We have group homes for teens that are having some difficulties in their life. We have family preservation programs and visitation programs, and golly, you name it. We pretty much, of course, the basic material assistance where we provide, you know, food and utility assistance and help with just the basic needs that people have. So it pretty much covers the whole gamut.
Sure does. I think you're kind of close to covering the gamut, aren't you, Pete?
We are. Family services throughout the whole metropolitan area in 9 counties right around the metro area. And there are really 4 primary areas that we're focusing on: mental health, substance abuse, and gambling counseling, all outpatient services. And then the second area would be child welfare services. We operate 3 shelters for abused and neglected children and do a lot of work with families who are at risk of abusing and neglecting their kids. A third area is what we call juvenile justice programming. We do a lot of work with teenagers who are involved in the juvenile justice system and their families to try to keep them from going down a road of crime. And then surrounding those 3 core areas, there are a lot of ancillary services as well.
Okay, and Catholic Charities.
Catholic Charities of Omaha actually serves 23 counties within Nebraska, and we serve up to 65,000 people every year that we see through a variety of our programs, anything from adoption, domestic violence. We have a large substance abuse center here in Omaha that serves over 85 inpatients every single day, as well as mental health counseling, family counseling, pantry programs, and a variety of other community services.
Okay, let's get down to the issue of the Bush proposal. For the record, many organizations, including some of yours, and you can straighten me out on this, do receive in some form federal money, whether it's passed down through local grants or what. Isn't that correct?
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
Oh, that's across the board. But so it's not for those that their first reaction is you're not a faith-based group in family service, but for those that are concerned about it, this is nothing new.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Catholic Services has been, and Salvation Army.
Right.
It's only new in this way, in that both Catholic Charities and the Salvation Army, Catholic Charities has a separate 501c3 that offers these services. And the way I read the Bush proposal, part of what they're looking at is faith-based organizations in and of themselves, as churches or as mosques or synagogues, could provide those services without that separate organization that's set up and is organized separate from the faith itself.
But the Salvation Army actually is a 501c3, and it also is a church in addition to a social service agency, so it's somewhat different than Catholic Charities because it is a church. And we do receive federal funds in a number of different areas, federal funds, state funds, as well as other related government funds. And we are also, I'm very aware of the Charitable Choice Amendment from 1996, and basically I think what Bush is doing is building on that because that was primarily looking at the TANF funds, or the Personal Responsibility Work Opportunities Act, that was enacted in 1996.
As we began to reform welfare.
That's right. It's kind of growing on that, but I don't see it as anything that is substantially different. I think it's an expansion of the awareness that there needs to be a partnering of sorts and bring it maybe to a new level.
Well, you have a different setup than Catholic Charities.
That's right.
But when I looked at this initially, I did say, oh, church state, you know, I'm a little concerned about that. For instance, a couple of weeks ago we had Pastor Bob Timberlake on from the Open Door Mission, which is doesn't get federal funding. I mean, basically they work on private donations. But when you go there and you're part of the program for as a homeless male or female there, you have to participate in religious services. Okay, and they make that pretty clear, and they keep themselves pretty separate so that they have that kind of religious freedom. Perfectly understood. But there, I think there's probably some reaction that, well, let me ask you this, Pete. Do people come to family service because sometimes they're concerned about, they want a non-religious based program, or may have a misunderstanding about what Catholic Charities or Salvation Army does?
Well, I think there's definitely a role for the non-sectarian organization, and most of our organizations, even though we're non-sectarian today, we come from, our roots are in the religious community. But absolutely, some people choose family service because it is a non-sectarian organization, even though the service we deliver may not be significantly different from Catholic Charities and what they deliver if they were delivering the same service.
And let's make it clear that both Catholic Charities and Salvation Army do not sit there and take a religious inventory.
That's correct. As a matter of fact, Catholic Charities, I can certainly speak for, serves a vast majority of folks who have absolutely no experience, history, or belong to the Catholic Church. I mean, that's just part of the mission that we certainly don't require nor even ask if they are affiliated in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, if you have a mother who's been abused and her children, you're not going to, I mean, you wouldn't do it anyway, but that's just not your policy.
Right, and we certainly never mandate religious participation in the programs that we have as well. It's always, people know that we are a church, we let them know that, but there's no pressure, there's no real involvement as far as the doctrinal issues go. They come strictly for the service. And the Salvation Army as a church is a very small denomination, so certainly most of the people that we serve, many of them probably are non-church
the odds
people.
are.
Yeah, it would be very odd
not.
that they would be involved in the Salvation Army Church to begin with.
Well, one of the things that's interesting is that historically, you mentioned, Pete, that I know there are a lot of good organizations that were founded by either denominations or groups of denominations or groups of congregations, or just, I remember Utah Halley was founded by Churchwomen United. It's a residential psychiatric care facility north of Omaha, and people of religious faith, because doing good works has always been part of the Judeo-Christian ethic, and even the Muslims, which is another burgeoning group in the United States. That's been part of their thing. So this is not new.
No, this isn't new at all. And I think historically, Catholic Charities really received some of its first, or partnered with the government locally here, in the 30s during the Depression, when Catholic Charities received actual poor relief vouchers to serve individuals in our community, and they received those vouchers from both county and state government here. So this has been going on for decades, for quite some time. Now, the Catholic community nationally has always believed that it makes more sense to separate out from the individual or local parishes and develop their own service organization. It provides economies of scale, and it provides a variety of other benefits in order to do that more effectively and efficiently for a variety of folks that we serve. So I think when Pete talked about the separate corporations, separate nonprofit corporations, and how Catholic Charities is split off, that's very true. They've just found that that's the best way to do this. I think, however, President Bush's comments and concept has been a little taken out of context, because if you really look at it, he is talking about both faith-based and community-based or private.
Right, it's secular alternatives, I think they've been using various phrases. Let's let the constitutional lawyers debate separation of church and state here, because I'm certainly not equipped, and that's not your bailiwick. I mean, we could get some Creighton and Nebraska Law School professors on it, and maybe Bob Wolfson from the Anti-Defamation League or the ACLU people from the ACLU. But let me ask questions. Is there some concern, because you are all organizations with a tremendous heritage nationally and locally. You have all worked together in problem solving in terms of, and also in ascertaining the needs of this community, which are very important parts of the picture. Is there some concern that groups will just jump up out of the woodwork with good intentions? And I'm not talking turf wars or jealousy, but you have gone through all streamlining, working on economies in tough times, working with United Way in terms of what the real needs are in this community. I mean, what are some of your fears about, kind of moving in this direction?
I think one of the concerns that needs to be evaluated carefully is what drives the selection of faith-based groups who are going to be eligible to provide services that are federally funded and mandated. And professional competency has to be one of the primary drivers for that. All of our organizations, for example, are nationally accredited. We go through stringent, we meet stringent standards in terms of the way we deliver our services.
The outcomes.
The outcomes and our quality assurance factors. And while I think there's a very important place for congregations and small congregations or large congregations to partner with the traditional human service industry or the traditional human service community, I think that's one of my biggest concerns, is how do you choose and how do you ensure professional competency? Because to provide professional counseling requires a certain, as an example, requires a professional expertise.
Well, even something as where you have a residential situation, you have residential aids or whatever, background checks. I mean, there's all kinds of criteria that. Yeah, it's red tape, and it is, but it's been tried and true to be over for a good reason over a long
Well, you're
time.
talking about those regulatory and licensing types of oversights that we all need to comply with currently. And I would agree with Pete. I think one of the issues, as I read through Bush's statement, was that he really is pairing two things. He's pairing the fact that they're looking at shifting funds to involve what they call the civic society, which includes both faith-based and non-faith-based organizations.
Those with the civic concerns and interests.
Exactly, as well as the volunteer aspect. I don't know, the text really talked about enhancing the AmeriCorps program and bringing in the volunteer capacity. And so it was kind of like both in terms of bringing in additional manpower as well as bringing additional fiscal resources. And then there was the other caveat that you mentioned about the tax credits, itemized, being able to deduct charitable contributions without itemizing. And so one of the concerns I may have is there may be an implicit expectation then that people will, because they're giving more charitably, we don't need to put as many government funds toward it, which we all struggle with on an ongoing basis. None of the programs I don't think we offer, we're getting paid 100% at our cost through our current government funding streams. So those would be my concerns.
Well, okay, well, let's skip to that. One of the things, and I don't mean to make this sound like a partisan statement, the net effect of bolstering, having services that begin and are developed in the community certainly makes sense to me, rather than government mandates. I mean, I think we've all And maybe there's some efficiencies without layers of this money goes down to the state level, and then it goes
Right.
down to the city level, and then it finally gets down to you guys anyway.
Right.
But what is the real agenda here? Is there some concern about that, about maybe reducing government spending and hoping the population will pick it up? Because we do want to reduce taxes. I mean, I think everybody sort of agrees with this that looks at their paycheck. But what's
that's
going on here?
That's an excellent point. I'm not sure we know yet. I think we could
we do.
speculate. I'm not sure we know. But whether it be taking a look at what's the agenda financially, fiscally, or what's the agenda in terms of standards and quality of services, I think that's what really calls all of us to careful analysis of this whole proposal that President Bush has put forth, and I think it deserves careful analysis.
I agree, and if you look at our experience as providers in relation to our relationship with government as a funding source, there clearly is an expectation that that partnership means that the not-for-profit community will pick up part of the tab for what are government mandated services.
Because you've done that all
Right.
along,
Yes.
That's right.
and the good people of the community.
Support
That's
that.
At all levels, all
levels.
Yes.
socioeconomic levels
Yes,
have kicked in what they could.
Right.
And then the other thing is that because we want to parlay these volunteer hours, which I mean, I've gone to every one of you have had banquets that I've been to, and you've lauded your volunteers because if you translated that into dollars, but that can't be counted on as more volunteers and less government dollars.
That's right.
In
There's
the
not a
big
direct
picture.
correlation. There really isn't. And volunteers, and you know this well, that volunteers today, it's a different volunteer than it used to be
right.
10, 15 years ago. People are different in terms of their lifestyles.
Well, certainly the two-parent family working. There used to be sort of this role that dad would go out and work, and mom, assuming that she had the luxury of doing that and would be a volunteer. I mean, being a
Right.
professional volunteer was
a career.
it was a career, and it wasn't respected enough, I think, in its time. But we don't. It's kind of hit and miss. You can't always depend. Although you have some dependable volunteers, I know, but you can't depend on the stream.
That's right. Well, especially in some of the specialized services, Pete mentioned professional counselors. I mean, there are certain things that you need to have someone that has the right qualifications that meets all the rigors of that professional practice. You just
Right.
can't, you can't.
And you
just
can't
pull
have
in a
volunteers
volunteer.
around confidential information.
That's correct.
And there are certain
things have
policies.
changed.
That's right. I wanted to just mention, you talked about the partisan aspects. I was interested to note that Bush did appoint a Democrat, DiIulio, to head this office, and that he also appeared in a joint conference with Senator Lieberman to promote the tax cut with the credit for the charitable deductions. So I think he is at least making those initial attempts to get a bipartisan base to support this effort. And I think conceptually, ideologically, it makes sense that we all work together. They were really focusing this on this civic responsibility, not just the personal responsibility of the welfare reform, but the civic responsibility. And I think the biggest concern would be that the fact that there won't be shrinking dollars, but the same service level expected or higher, but shrinking dollars available. We're supposed to do more with less.
And I would even go a step further and say we need to be careful to make sure that it isn't just taking dollars from one pool
That's
that currently
right,
exists and shifting them, because that's not what our system needs. And we are all well aware of that. We need
right.
additional dollars. in
I was going to
order
bring that
help
up.
provide the
If you
services.
assess, and all of you do this on a, probably daily you talk about it, but you assess it professionally, quarterly, annually, and in your long range planning,
correct.
is that the needs, despite a wonderful economy that we're a little concerned about right now, not overly, but some of the needs have increased, and no one's acknowledged that in all this discussion that I've read in the national press.
Well, we certainly have seen that. We do a lot of material assistance, and our needs, the requests we're having in certain areas, well, particularly like heat aid, which of course,
heat aid, which you administer,
which we understand with the current utility costs have gone up 200 to 300% in the last couple of years, and so we're seeing you know, more and more the people coming to us are the working poor. They're not the people that traditionally
right.
were sitting home, as some people, you know, that had the concept of the welfare mom.
Yeah, with the
We
cable
don't-
TV
We're not
switch.
seeing those people. We're seeing people that are usually working one, sometimes
two
two or
jobs.
three
Yeah.
jobs to pay for, to just cover the basic needs of their families. And I think what we're going to see with the welfare reauthorization is more talk about the living wage and what a living wage really is. And the economy certainly is taking a downward turn, and I'm not trying to be too pessimistic, but I think there is going to be an increased demand on all of the agencies already working out there. And of course, you know, the concern would be, you know, if there's not enough resources, and the expectation then that somehow volunteers will pick up what professional staff
Yeah.
may in fact have currently, or, you know, or will be doing in the future.
And I can give you another real quick example, echoing the need. One of the core programs that we offer is outpatient counseling for families and individuals and children. And in the last 2 years, our calls for intakes from families have gone from roughly about 200 to 250 a month to last month 850 calls for intakes. And that growth has happened over the last probably 5 years, incrementally over that period of time. And the funds for those services, because a lot of those people are looking for sliding scale services. They're working people.
They're
who-
willing to pay
They're
something.
willing to pay
That's right.
something, but they can't pay the whole cost of the service. And they don't have their insurance. And I know we try to share with other agencies who have that service, but the need far outweighs, the demand far
Well,
outweighs
all
the
mental
need.
health services are in a bind
Absolutely.
statewide.
Yeah, we've read a lot
and
about that.
and the other thing is, just the other night in the Omaha World Herald, we rank in the bottom half in our region on the money spent per capita for substance abuse.
Yes, we
and they're crying out for that. So I guess the point I'm trying to make, and I'm not trying to be alarmist or critical, but the point is, if there is the thought that in the end there are going to be less dollars because we're going to save by getting rid of some of the bureaucracy, the federal, you know, the hand down and all that, and you know, the good charitable people of America picking up the slack, you know, is that a little unrealistic? At least in the short term. I mean,
I think there are two issues here. One, I do believe we can save money by privatizing or allowing some of those services that are currently provided through state, federal, county services coming down to the local communities. We know we can. Very quickly, an example, in 1979, Douglas County Hospital ran a 16-bed substance abuse center. Annual budget, $1.6 million. Last year, 2000, Catholic Charities' 85-bed substance abuse program had an annual budget cost of $1.8 million. 20 years later, many more beds later, we've seen that a private agency has been able to provide the necessary service at a very little increase. However, having said that,
caveat.
that's right. The need has grown so dramatically.
Or it was not recognized
Or not
as much, and people
recognized.
weren't as public, you know, knowledgeable about.
That even that shift is not going to make up the ground that I think all of us realize that we're facing.
That's the positive thing that I see in Bush's initiative, and that is a recognition that the community, the secular and the private, faith-based, and the non-sectarian community, human service community, has the ability to provide these services in a much more cost-effective, outcome-producing manner than the government does.
And in touch.
yes,
A little
we know
more.
what the problems are.
I mean, we have United Way, which monitors agencies and kind of pushes, you know, are we really meeting the needs? And you do that.
We
The
have
good
more
agencies
people
do that.
monitoring us, Carol, than you would want to know.
So there is oversight, but I think what you were trying to iterate was that concern about the oversight of how this program
Right.
evolves,
Right.
and who can get money. I mean, I could conceive of. I just read a Omaha World Herald columnist, I think Mike Kelly, talked about these two little
Yes.
ladies in this small
Angels and
church
Wheels,
that
yes,
run this
yeah.
van to
Right.
get older
Right.
people out into
Right.
doctor's appointments,
Right.
and that was a little
Right.
thing, you know, a little
Right.
church thing.
Right.
And I thought, well, you know, in relation to this, I said, maybe there will be small little operators who fill these little niches in little neighborhoods, you know, and do it pretty efficiently. But I guess my fear is that the Church of the Temple Two Shoes is going to just erupt out of the dirt, and maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just born cynic.
Yeah. You know, Carol, I think that there was the same fear with the Charitable Choice Amendment, that are we going to have all these groups sprouting up, you know, to access this. And it was really interesting because I got all these books about the legislation. I disseminated to all the people in our division. We have a 2.5 state area that we work with, and we've heard very little about it other than within our organization when I go to national and regional meetings. There really hasn't been a lot of discussion. So I don't know if you know, I think that there's an opportunity perhaps for additional providers, which could be a very good thing. I don't know if we're going to see it to the degree that we might anticipate, you know, because of the experience with charitable choice.
Well, the ACLU is a little concerned about discrimination.
Yes.
Even in the religion, if you just take the religious aspect of it, of the faith-based groups, that that certain churches, and it could depend on administrations, would have favor, or become, in changes of administration, fall in disfavor. And so, I mean, maybe I'm just being, you know, it's just the questioning nature of myself. But are these legitimate questions?
Well, the ACLU is also concerned about, I mean, the civil rights laws as it relates to this. And Bob Jones University, if Bob Jones University was a church and their beliefs were practiced in hiring and delivery of service, then there are civil rights laws being violated in that instance. So I think there are some legitimate issues there. Whether or not that evolves, well, whether or not that's the intention and this is how that evolved, it's the question of who is going to be selected, who is who is an okay provider,
and
what
if Catholic Charities decided tomorrow that they wouldn't hire anyone to work except Roman Catholics,
right?
Or you would have a hard time just hiring Salvation Army people. But the point is that then you might have some. The other thing is are you worried at all if, you know, government salaries, you know, the state providers of some of these services are probably a little bit above what you're paying, that this will depress overall salaries, assuming that the state and federal employees don't win some battle to kind of keep their own jobs, that this could depress salaries?
Well, one of the concerns, I thought of this when you talked about the difference between what it costs Douglas County and Catholic Charities. We struggle with constantly trying to advocate to get higher salaries for all of our staff. I mean, we all sit on our boards and we're constantly hammering away at getting higher salaries for some of our staff. And I do know when you're looking at other things where there's been attempts to transfer state employees that maybe have been
displaced?
Displaced into private agencies, there is a drop in salary and a drop in benefit. And I also know that I would think that the people that may be most resistant to this are those current employees in government agencies that provide these services, because
there's
they have a lot to
resistance
lose.
with my director because we've run out of time. But we've raised some good points, and I hope people pursue this. I want to thank Linda Berkeley from the Salvation Army, Pete Tulipana from Family Service, and Jean Sassatelli from Catholic Charities, and remind you that you can go on the web, unotv.unomaha.edu, get the latest on this program, even view a past program. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Keep reading, keep informed, and thanks for joining us on Consider This.
Consider This, with host Carol Schrader, is supported in part by Better Business Equipment and by Nebraskans for Public Television.